The autumn wind swept through Silverton, Colorado, carrying with it whispers that would change one woman's life forever. Sarah Elizabeth Hartford stood at the window of her family's grand Victorian home, watching the golden aspens sway against the backdrop of the San Juan Mountains. At 23, she was considered past her prime for marriage, much to her mother's dismay. "Sarah, darling, Mr. Pembroke will be calling this afternoon," her mother, Constance Hartford, announced from the parlor doorway. "Do try to look presentable. He's from a very good Boston family." Sarah suppressed a sigh. This would be the fifth suitor her mother had paraded before her in as many months. Each one more pompous than the last, speaking of investments and inheritances while looking at her as if she were merely another asset to acquire. "Yes, mother," she replied dutifully, though her heart wasn't in it. That evening, as expected, Jonathan Pembroke arrived in his finest suit, his mustache waxed to perfection. He spent 2 hours discussing his father's silver mining interests and barely asked Sarah a single question about herself. When he finally departed, her mother beamed. "What a catch! Sarah, you must encourage him." But Sarah's mind was elsewhere. For weeks, she had noticed a man at the edge of town, a mountain man who came down from the high country every Saturday to sell furs and dried meat. The townspeople called him Broken Creek Jack or simply the Hermit. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a winter sky. While others mocked his worn leather clothing and simple ways, Sarah saw something different: dignity, strength, and a quiet intelligence that intrigued her. The following Saturday, Sarah made an excuse to visit the general store alone. As she walked down Main Street, she saw him, Jack Morrison, as she'd learned his name to be, loading supplies onto a pack mule. Several young men from town had gathered nearby, snickering. "Hey, mountain man," called out Thomas Whitley, the banker's son. "Don't you ever bathe? You smell worse than your mule." The others laughed cruelly. Jack said nothing, simply continued his work with steady hands. "I heard he lives in a cave," another taunted. "Probably sleeps with the bears." Sarah's face flushed with anger at their cruelty. Without thinking, she marched directly toward Jack's mule. "Mr. Morrison, isn't it?" she said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I've been meaning to speak with you about your furs. My father mentioned they're the finest quality in 3 counties." The young men fell silent, shocked that Miss Hartford, from one of Silverton's most prominent families, would address the mountain man directly. Jack looked up, surprise flickering across his weathered face. Up close, Sarah noticed his eyes held a sharp intelligence and something else, a deep loneliness that resonated with her own. "Miss Hartford," he said, his voice deep and surprisingly refined. "That's kind of you to say. Your father's been a fair trader. I wonder," Sarah continued, her heart pounding, "if you might tell me about life in the high country. I've always been fascinated by the wilderness." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "It's not as romantic as books make it seem, miss. It's hard living." "Perhaps," she replied, "but I imagine it's also free." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding. The mocking young men dispersed, confused and disappointed by the lack of drama. Over the following weeks, Sarah found reasons to be in town every Saturday. She and Jack would talk, brief conversations at first, then longer ones. He told her about the mountains, about tracking elk through virgin snow, about nights so clear you could see every star in the Milky Way. She told him about books she'd read, ideas she'd had, dreams she'd never shared with anyone. "Why do you come down here?" she asked one day. "When it's clear you don't enjoy the town's company." Jack was quiet for a moment. "Supplies, mostly. And I suppose I was lonely. But I think I was looking for something too. Or someone." By December, all of Silverton was buzzing with scandal. Miss Sarah Hartford, who could have married any suitable gentleman in Colorado, was being courted by that filthy mountain man. The gossip reached a fever pitch when Sarah was seen accepting a carved wooden box from Jack in front of the hotel. Her mother was beside herself. "Sarah Elizabeth Hartford, have you lost your mind? That man is nothing. He has nothing. He lives like an animal in the wilderness." "He's more of a gentleman than any man you've introduced me to," Sarah replied calmly. "Your father will cut you off without a cent." "Then I'll have nothing," Sarah said. "But I'll have my choice." Her father, Samuel Hartford, was indeed furious. He summoned Sarah to his study, his face red with anger. "I've worked my entire life to build this family's position. I won't have you throw it away on some penniless mountain hermit." "He's asked me to marry him," Sarah said quietly. "And I've said yes." The color drained from her father's face. "You will not." "I forbid it. I'm 23, father. I don't need your permission. But I would like your blessing." "You'll never have it. Marry that man, and you'll never enter this house again. You'll be penniless, living in squalor, and don't come crying to me when you realize what you've thrown away." On a cold January morning in 1785, Sarah Elizabeth Hartford married Jack Morrison in a simple ceremony at the small church. Only the minister and his wife attended as witnesses. The town watched from their windows, shaking their heads at the foolish girl who'd thrown away everything for a man with nothing. Sarah wore a simple blue dress, not the elaborate wedding gown her mother had been saving for her. Jack wore his cleanest buckskin jacket and a new shirt he'd purchased specially. When he placed a simple gold band on her finger, Sarah felt more certain of anything than she'd ever been in her life. After the ceremony, Jack helped Sarah onto his second horse, a gentle mare he'd brought down from the mountains especially for her. They rode out of Silverton as the town watched, many women clucking their tongues in pity for the poor deluded girl. "Are you certain?" Jack asked as they left the last buildings behind. "There's still time to change your mind. Your family would take you back." Sarah looked back at the town, then forward to the mountains ahead. "I've never been more certain of anything." They rode for hours, climbing higher into the San Juan Mountains. The trail grew steeper, the air thinner and colder. Sarah had packed only what she could carry in her saddlebags, a few dresses, her favorite books, and a locket with her grandmother's picture. As the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of pink and gold, Jack led them along a narrow trail beside a rushing creek. "Is this Broken Creek?" Sarah asked. "Yes. We're almost there." Sarah steeled herself. She'd heard the rumors, Jack lived in a cave or maybe a crude log lean-to. She was prepared for rough living. She'd survive it. She'd make it a home somehow. The trail wound through a dense grove of aspen and pine, then opened into a small meadow. In the fading light, Sarah saw nothing. No cave, no shelter, not even a tent. "Jack," she said, confusion in her voice. He dismounted and helped her down. "Come with me." He led her through the meadow toward what appeared to be a sheer rock face. As they drew closer, Sarah noticed a narrow opening, almost hidden by carefully placed evergreen branches. "This is a passage," Jack explained. "It's how I keep the place hidden." They led the horses through the passage, a natural corridor through the rock that twisted for about 50 yards. Sarah's heart sank. Perhaps he did live in a cave after all. Then they emerged into another, larger valley, completely hidden from the outside world. And there, in the center of the valley, stood a magnificent log mansion. Sarah stopped dead in her tracks, her mouth falling open. The structure before her was no crude cabin, it was a masterpiece of craftsmanship. 3 stories tall, built from massive logs that gleamed golden in the twilight, with real glass windows, a wraparound porch, and stone chimneys at either end. "Jack," she whispered. What is this?" He watched her face carefully. "This is my home. Our home now, if you'll have it." "But how? Everyone said you were, that you had nothing." Jack took her hand and led her toward the house. "Let me show you." Inside was even more astonishing. The main room had polished wood floors covered with beautiful rugs. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, already crackling with a fire someone had laid. The furniture was solid and well made, some of it clearly bought from fine craftsmen, some carved by hand with extraordinary skill. "Sit," Jack said gently, guiding Sarah to a comfortable chair. "I'll make some tea, and I'll explain everything." As he moved about the kitchen, a real kitchen with a modern stove and pump for water, Sarah tried to process what she was seeing. The walls held paintings and sketches of mountain landscapes. Bookshelves lined one entire wall, filled with hundreds of volumes. This wasn't the home of a poor mountain man, this was the home of someone with considerable means and refined taste. Jack returned with 2 cups of tea and sat across from her. In the warm firelight, cleaned up and relaxed, he looked different, younger, more refined. "My name is Jack Morrison," he began. "But I was born Jackson Edward Morrison III, in Philadelphia. My father owned Morrison Enterprises, shipping, railroads, and mining interests across the country." Sarah's eyes widened. She'd heard of Morrison Enterprises, everyone had. "I was raised to take over the family business," Jack continued. "The best schools, European tours, all of it. I was engaged to a woman my parents chose, Elizabeth Vanderholt. We were to be married, merge 2 fortunes, have the wedding of the century." He paused, staring into his teacup. 3 months before the wedding, I discovered Elizabeth was having an affair with my business partner. When I confronted them, they didn't even deny it. Elizabeth laughed and told me she'd never loved me, only my money and position. She said all the women in our circle were the same, that love was a fairy tale for the poor. Sarah reached out and touched his hand. "I broke off the engagement. My parents were furious, the scandal, the lost business alliance. We fought terribly. My father said I was throwing away everything over foolish pride. My mother said I should marry Elizabeth anyway, that love didn't matter in their world." "So you left," Sarah said softly. "I left everything. Changed my name slightly, dressed simply, and came west. I bought this land with money from a trust fund my grandmother had left me, money my father couldn't touch. I built this house with my own hands, with help from 2 men I hired who never asked questions and kept my secrets." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at his hidden valley. "I came down to Silverton dressed as a poor mountain man to sell furs because I wanted to see what people were really like. If anyone would see past appearances to the person underneath. For 3 years, I watched. Everyone treated me exactly as they appeared, the wealthy with contempt, the poor with pity or mockery. Everyone judged me by my clothes and my perceived station." He turned to face her, his eyes intense. "Until you. You spoke to me with kindness before you knew anything about me except that I was being mocked. You spent time with me, talked with me, because you found me interesting, not because of what I could give you. You gave up everything, your family, your inheritance, your position, to marry a man you thought was poor." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "You passed the test I didn't even know I was giving," Jack said, kneeling before her. "You proved that real love exists, the kind that sees the person, not the position. The kind my parents said was a fairy tale." Over the following days, Jack showed Sarah the full extent of his hidden domain. The valley was larger than it appeared from the house, nearly 500 acres of protected wilderness. There was a barn with several horses, not just the ones he took to town. A smokehouse, a workshop where he did fine woodworking, and even a small library building separate from the main house. The previous owner died with no heirs, Jack explained. This valley had been in his family for generations. The entrance passage is natural, formed by earthquake and erosion thousands of years ago. He used it to hide from the world after losing his wife. When I heard about it, I knew it was perfect. I could have my privacy but still access civilization when needed." Sarah walked through the house, marveling at every detail. The bedroom was stunning, with a massive 4-poster bed and more beautiful rugs. The bathroom had a modern water system Jack had engineered himself, heated by coils running from the fireplace. "This must have cost a fortune to build," she said. "3 years and most of my trust fund," Jack admitted. "But I built something real here. Something that's mine, not my father's. And now it's ours." In the library building, Sarah discovered Jack's true passion. Besides books, the room contained detailed journals of his observations of wildlife, weather patterns, and the changing seasons. His sketches of plants and animals showed real talent. "I've been documenting everything," he said. "I thought perhaps I might publish it someday, under a pen name. Scientific observations from an anonymous naturalist." "Jack, these are incredible," Sarah breathed, turning through the pages. "You have to publish these." That night, as they sat before the fireplace, Sarah asked, "Do you ever miss Philadelphia? Your old life?" Jack considered the question. "I miss my younger sister sometimes. Charlotte never cared about society's rules. But the rest of it? The fake smiles, the business deals, the constant performance of wealth and status? No. I don't miss it at all. Out here, I can be myself. I can work with my hands, think my own thoughts, live by my own values. And when you came to town, playing the poor mountain man, was any of that real?" "All of it was real," Jack said firmly. "The furs I sold, I trapped myself. The meat, I hunted. I learned those skills, and I'm proud of them. I wanted to prove to myself that I could survive without my family's money. That I was worth something beyond a name and a bank account." Sarah moved closer to him. "You proved something to me too. That real goodness and character exist. That there are men who value more than appearances and dowries." The winter passed in a way Sarah had never imagined possible. Rather than the harsh struggle she'd expected, life in the hidden valley proved rich and fulfilling. Jack taught her to snowshoe across the valley, to identify animal tracks, to appreciate the profound silence of snow-covered mountains. They spent long evenings reading aloud to each other from Jack's extensive library. Sarah discovered he'd collected works of philosophy, science, poetry, and adventure tales from around the world. They debated ideas, shared observations, and talked until the fire burned low. "I never had conversations like this in my parents' parlor," Sarah confessed one night. "There, everything was about maintaining appearances. Here, I can say what I really think." Jack smiled. "That's what I love about you. You have a mind of your own, and you're not afraid to use it." Sarah also discovered Jack's other secrets. In his workshop, he showed her the fine furniture he'd crafted, tables, chairs, and cabinets of extraordinary quality. "I sell these in Denver under a different name," he explained. "Morrison Woodworks. No one knows it's me. The money helps maintain this place and gives me something to do during long winters." "You're full of surprises, Jackson Morrison," Sarah said, running her hand over a beautifully inlaid table. "I hope they're good surprises. The best kind." But Sarah had her own revelation to share. One morning in late February, she woke feeling ill. After several days of nausea, the truth became clear. "Jack," she said one evening, taking his hand. "We're going to have a child." The joy on his face was unlike anything she'd seen before. He lifted her and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully, worried he'd been too rough. "A child," he whispered. "Sarah, are you happy?" "I've never been happier in my life." That night, they talked about the future. Jack's expression grew serious. "Sarah, I need to know, do you have any regrets? About leaving your family, your old life?" "None," she said firmly. "Jack, in Silverton, I was dying slowly. I was expected to smile and nod and marry whoever my parents chose. To live a life someone else designed for me. Here, I'm alive. I'm choosing my own path. How could I regret that?" Spring came to the mountains in a rush of meltwater and returning birds. Jack prepared to make his first trip back to Silverton since their marriage. Sarah was 5 months pregnant now, glowing with health. "Are you certain you want to come?" Jack asked. "People will talk." "Let them talk," Sarah replied. "Besides, I need fabric for the baby's clothes and a few other supplies." This time, however, Jack didn't dress in his rough mountain garb. Instead, he wore fine trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a well-tailored jacket. He'd trimmed his beard neatly and looked every inch the successful gentleman he actually was. They traveled in a wagon pulled by 2 magnificent horses, not the rough pack mule from before. When they rode into Silverton, conversation stopped mid-sentence. People stared openly at the transformation. This couldn't be the same man, but it was. Sarah sat beside him, clearly pregnant, looking healthier and happier than anyone had ever seen her. Jack drove directly to the general store. The owner, Mr. Peterson, nearly dropped his ledger. "And Mr. Morrison," he stammered. "Good morning, Mr. Peterson," Jack said pleasantly. "My wife and I need several items. We'll pay cash, as always." The word cash caught several people's attention. Jack proceeded to purchase not just basic supplies but expensive items, quality fabric, the best tools, imported tea and coffee. While Jack conducted business, Sarah wandered to the window and saw her mother walking down the street. Constance Hartford caught sight of Sarah and froze. For a moment, their eyes met. Sarah saw shock in her mother's face, shock at Sarah's fine dress, her healthy glow, her obvious contentment. Before her mother could look away, Sarah smiled and nodded politely. Her mother hesitated, then hurried away. "That was cold," said a voice behind her. Sarah turned to find Mrs. Chen, who ran the boarding house. She was one of the few people in town who'd never mocked Jack. "I'm not being cold," Sarah said. "I'm being honest. I'm happy, Mrs. Chen. Happier than I ever could have been in my mother's world." Mrs. Chen studied her. "I believe you, child. You look like a woman who knows she made the right choice." As Jack and Sarah loaded their wagon, a crowd had gathered. Among them were the young men who'd mocked Jack months earlier. Thomas Whitley approached, his face red with embarrassment. "Mr. Morrison," he began awkwardly. We owe you an apology. We had no idea." "You had no idea I had money," Jack said evenly. "So you felt comfortable mocking me. Tell me, Mr. Whitley, if you'd known, would you have treated me better?" Thomas looked at his feet. Yes, sir." "Then you've learned nothing," Jack said. "True character is how you treat people when you think they can't benefit you. Good day." He helped Sarah onto the wagon, and they drove away, leaving Thomas and his friend standing in humiliated silence. A week later, a rider came to the hidden valley, the first visitor since Sarah had arrived. It was Mr. Peterson from the general store, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Mr. Morrison, Mrs. Morrison," he said, hat in hand. "I hope you'll forgive the intrusion. I followed at a distance, out of sight, just to see which direction you went. I wanted to speak with you both privately." Jack invited him in, curious. Over coffee, Mr. Peterson explained himself. "I've known your father was Samuel Hartford from Philadelphia," he said to Jack. "Recognized the family resemblance when you first came to town, though I kept it to myself. Figured you had your reasons for hiding." Jack and Sarah exchanged surprised looks. "I received a telegram at the store," Mr. Peterson continued. "It's addressed to Mrs. Sarah Morrison. It's from her parents." He handed Sarah the telegram with an apologetic expression. Sarah's hands shook as she opened it. The message was from her mother: "Please come home. Father is ill. Wants to see you. No judgment. Please." Sarah looked at Jack, torn. He took her hand. "It's your choice, Sarah. But if you want to go, I'll go with you." 2 days later, they rode into Silverton again, this time heading directly to the Hartford mansion. The maid who answered the door gasped at the sight of them but quickly showed them to Samuel Hartford's bedroom. Sarah's father looked smaller than she remembered, pale against white pillows. Her mother sat beside him, her eyes red from crying. "Sarah," her father said weakly. "You came." "Of course I came, father." Samuel Hartford looked at Jack, studying him carefully. "Mr. Morrison. Or should I say, Mr. Morrison of Morrison Enterprises. You know?" Jack asked. "I made inquiries after you left. I'm a wealthy man because I'm thorough, not because I'm foolish. I discovered who you really were. And I discovered something else, you gave up everything for my daughter. A real fortune, much larger than mine." He reached out a shaking hand to Sarah. "I was wrong, daughter. I thought you were throwing your life away on a poor man. I was trying to protect you from hardship. But you were wiser than me. You chose a man of real character, someone who'd already proven he valued things more important than money." Tears streamed down Sarah's face. "Father. Let me finish," he interrupted gently. "I'm dying, Sarah. The doctor gives me a few months at most. I want to die knowing you've forgiven me. Knowing you're happy." "I'm very happy, father," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "And I forgive you. I always did." Over the next hour, they talked, really talked, perhaps for the first time. Samuel Hartford asked Jack about his life, his plans, his values. Jack spoke honestly about his disillusionment with Philadelphia society and his desire to live authentically. "You built a life of substance," Samuel said admiringly. "That takes more courage than inheriting one." Before they left, Sarah's mother pulled her aside. "Sarah, I was so afraid for you. I thought you'd be miserable, living in poverty. Can you forgive me too?" Sarah hugged her mother tightly. "There's nothing to forgive. You loved me the best way you knew how." "Your mountain man," Constance said softly, "he's not what I expected." "He's exactly what I hoped for," Sarah replied. By the end of that week, the truth about Jack Morrison had spread throughout Silverton. Some people were embarrassed by how they'd treated him. Others were simply astonished. A few claimed they'd always known there was something different about him. The young men who'd mocked him publicly apologized. Jack accepted their apologies but also gave them something to think about. "I don't need you to treat me differently now that you know I have money," he told them. "I need you to treat everyone better, regardless of their circumstances. That's the lesson here." Sarah's father died peacefully 6 weeks later, with Sarah holding his hand. In his will, he left her a substantial inheritance, not as much as she would have received originally, but enough to secure her future. "Use it well," the will said. "You've already proven you don't need it to be happy. That's the best thing you could have taught your old father." With her inheritance, Sarah and Jack established a scholarship fund for young women in Silverton who wanted education but whose families couldn't afford it. They also donated to the church and helped several struggling families through difficult times, all done quietly, without seeking recognition. As Sarah's pregnancy progressed, Jack worked on expanding their hidden home. He built a nursery with hand-carved furniture and painted the walls with mountain scenes. He installed more modern conveniences, including an improved water heating system and better insulation. "I want our child to have everything," he said, "but I also want them to understand that wealth means nothing without character." In August, Sarah gave birth to a healthy daughter. They named her Charlotte, after Jack's sister, and Grace, after Sarah's grandmother. Little Charlie, as they called her, had her father's blue-gray eyes and her mother's determined chin. Jack wrote to his sister in Philadelphia, sharing the news. Charlotte wrote back immediately, thrilled to be an aunt. Her letter included surprising news of her own. Their father had softened after hearing about Jack's marriage and Charlie's birth. He wanted to reconcile. "He's not the man he was," Charlotte wrote. "He's learned something from watching what you chose to walk away from. He asks about you constantly. He wants to meet his granddaughter. Jack showed the letter to Sarah. What do you think? I think, Sarah said carefully, that your father is getting a second chance, just like mine did. And I think Charlie deserves to know her grandfather. The following spring, Jack's father and sister made the journey to Colorado. Jackson Edward Morrison too was humbled by the life his son had built, not just the impressive house and prosperous workshop, but the respect Jack had earned from his neighbors and the love evident in his family. I tried to make you into something I needed, the elder Morrison said to his son. But you became something better, yourself. I'm proud of you, son. Prouder than I've ever been. Jack's sister Charlotte fell in love with the mountains and the freedom they represented. She stayed for the entire summer, helping with baby Charlie and spending long afternoons talking with Sarah. You saved him, Charlotte told Sarah one day. Jack was dying inside in Philadelphia. He just didn't know it. You gave him permission to be who he really was. He saved me too, Sarah replied. From a life of pretty cages and empty conventions. Over the years, the Hidden Valley became not just a home but a refuge. Jack and Sarah had 2 more children, a son named Samuel, after Sarah's father, and another daughter, Elizabeth, who they called Lizzie. The children grew up strong and free, educated by their parents from the extensive library and by the mountains themselves. Jack's naturalist writings, published under a pen name, became influential in early conservation movements. His observations of wildlife and ecological systems were ahead of their time. Sarah helped him with the writing, and together they produced 3 books that were studied by scientists across the country. Morrison woodworks flourished. Jack's furniture became sought after by wealthy families across the West. He employed several craftsmen from Silverton, teaching them his techniques and paying them fair wages. The business grew, but Jack never let it consume him. Family came first, always. Silverton transformed too. The town became known not for its snobbishness but for its community spirit. The scholarship fund Sarah established helped dozens of young women get educations. Many of them became teachers, doctors, and business owners, changing the town's culture from within. The Hidden Valley kept its secrets. Few people beyond immediate family ever saw it. Jack occasionally brought his children to town, and people would marvel at how well-adjusted and educated they were. The Morrison children knew they lived differently than others, but they never flaunted their circumstances. They'd been taught, by example, that true wealth was in character, not possessions. When Charlotte was 16, she asked her father about his decision to leave Philadelphia. Did you ever regret it? She asked. Giving up everything? Jack looked around the valley, at his wife tending her garden, at his son practicing woodworking in the shop, at young Lizzie reading under a tree. He thought about the person he'd been in Philadelphia, hollow and lost despite all his privileges. Charlie, he said, I didn't give up everything. I gave up things that meant nothing to get everything that mattered. I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. Years later, when Jack and Sarah were in their 60s, a young couple came to the Hidden Valley. They'd heard rumors of the Morrison family and their unusual story. The young woman was engaged to a wealthy man she didn't love, pressured by her family. The young man was a poor farmer everyone told her to forget. Sarah and Jack invited them to stay for a week. They told their story, not to judge or advise, but simply to share. They showed the couple what they'd built, not through wealth but through partnership and genuine love. The question, Jack told them, isn't whether you choose wealth or poverty. It's whether you choose authenticity or pretense. Everything else follows from that. The young couple left with much to think about. 6 months later, they received a wedding invitation. The young woman had broken her engagement and married the farmer. They were starting fresh, choosing their own path. It was one of dozens of such couples over the years. The Morrison story became a legend in Colorado, the tale of the woman who married a poor mountain man, only to discover he was wealthy. But those who knew the truth understood the real story. It was about two people who found each other because they looked past surface appearances to see what really mattered. Sarah and Jack lived long lives, their love deepening with each passing year. When Jack passed away at 82, it was peacefully, in the home he'd built, surrounded by children and grandchildren. His last words to Sarah were simple: "You were worth everything." Sarah lived 3 more years. She spent them writing their story, not as a romance novel, but as a testament to what they'd learned. Her final words in the manuscript were these: "Society tells us to judge people by their wealth, their position, their appearance. But true judgment should be based on character, kindness, and authenticity. My husband taught me that the richest life isn't the one with the most money, it's the one lived true to yourself, with love, and with purpose. He was mocked as a poor mountain man, but he was the richest person I ever knew. And I was the luckiest woman alive to have found him." The hidden valley still stands, passed down through Morrison generations. The house Jack built with his own hands still shelters his descendants. And the story of the poor mountain man who wasn't poor at all continues to remind people that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or inherited, they can only be earned through living honestly, loving deeply, and having the courage to be yourself, no matter what the world thinks.